The neighbors heard Derek screaming at his pregnant wife through the rain, calling her worthless, telling her she'd never amount to anything. They watched her collapse to her knees in the mud, sobbing. Then they heard it, an engine sound so expensive it didn't belong in neighborhoods like this. When that Rolls-Royce door opened and that man in the custom-tailored suit stepped out, Derek's face drained of all color. He'd just destroyed the daughter of Robert Caldwell, the tech billionaire who owned half of Phoenix. Thunder rolled across Phoenix's Maryvale neighborhood that September evening, like nature itself was angry. Inside the cramped stucco house on Mesa Drive, Sarah stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, staring at the burnt pot of beans on the stove. 8 months pregnant, her belly pressed against the faded maternity dress she'd worn 4 times already that week. The smell of scorched food mixed with the scent of rain coming through the screen door, and she just knew this was going to be bad. Derek sat at the kitchen table in his stained t-shirt, a half-empty bottle of vodka next to his phone, his eyes bloodshot and dangerous. He'd been drinking more lately, especially since she'd started asking questions about his job. "I asked you to do one thing," Derek said, his voice low and sharp like broken glass. "One simple thing. Make dinner. That's all you had to do today, Sarah." She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain that her back had been killing her and the doctor said she needed to rest more. But Derek slammed his fist on the table so hard the bottle jumped. "The baby, the baby, the baby. Everything is about this damn baby. What about me? What about the fact that I'm out there hustling while you sit here doing nothing?" Sarah wanted to remind him about the 2 housekeeping jobs she'd worked until last month, scrubbing floors and bathrooms while her ankles swelled and her back screamed, saving every dollar for when the baby came. But she'd learned not to argue when he got like this. The last time she'd talked back, he'd punched a hole in the wall inches from her head. What happened next escalated so fast, Sarah barely had time to process it. Derek stood up, stormed into the bedroom, and started grabbing her clothes, shoes, toiletries, the small box containing ultrasound pictures. He threw everything out the front door into the rain while neighbors' lights started clicking on one by one. "Please," Sarah begged, grabbing his arm. "Think about the baby. Just let me stay tonight. I'll figure something out tomorrow, I promise." Derek shoved her off so hard her hand instinctively protecting her belly. Then he said the words that would haunt him forever. "You're nothing, you hear me? You're nothing. You came from nothing, you are nothing, and you're going to die as nothing." Across the street, Mrs. Chen called out from her porch telling Sarah to come over, but Sarah couldn't move. She couldn't think. She walked into that storm like a woman already drowning, sank to her knees in the mud, and let the rain mix with her tears while gathering her ruined belongings. Behind her, Derek slammed the door and locked it. The baby kicked inside her, as if asking what was happening, why everything felt so wrong. What Derek didn't know, what Sarah had kept hidden for 4 years, was that she'd been lying about having no family. 4 years earlier, before she'd even met Derek, Sarah had been working as a waitress at a tech conference at the Arizona Grand Resort. She'd been serving coffee when an older gentleman at the head table had looked up at her and gone completely pale. "What's your name?" he'd asked, standing up abruptly despite confused looks from everyone around him. "Sarah Mitchell, sir," she'd answered, worried she'd done something wrong. The man's hand had trembled as it went to his chest. "Your mother? What was your mother's name?" Sarah froze. "I don't know. I was left at a fire station when I was 3 days old. I grew up in foster care." The man's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter, my Catherine, she disappeared 18 years ago. We thought she was dead. But you have her eyes, her face, her—" He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showing her a photo of a young woman who looked exactly like Sarah. "I'm Robert Caldwell. I think you're my granddaughter." That night had changed everything. DNA tests confirmed it. Catherine had been her daughter, had run away at 16, lived on the streets, had her baby at a fire station, and disappeared. Robert had been searching for any trace of them for 18 years. He told Sarah about a trust fund, about a family, about a life she couldn't even imagine. $50 million waiting for her. But Sarah was 21 and terrified. The word family had scared her more than being alone, because family meant people who could abandon you, people who could hurt you. So she ran, changed her number, moved to a different part of Phoenix, and 3 weeks later met Derek at a grocery store. Simple, normal Derek that seemed safe compared to billionaire grandfathers and inheritance money she didn't think she deserved. Now, kneeling in the mud outside Derek's house with rain soaking through her clothes, Sarah's phone buzzed. The screen was cracked but still working. Unknown number. I've been watching. I'm coming. Hold on, sweetheart. Before she could process those words, she heard it. The engine. Deep, powerful, commanding. The headlights cut through the rain like searchlights. A midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb. The entire neighborhood went silent because everyone was about to witness something that would break the internet by morning.
The Rolls-Royce's presence on Mesa Drive was like dropping a diamond in a dumpster. It simply didn't belong. Mrs. Chen stood on her porch with both hands over her mouth. Mr. Rodriguez came outside despite the downpour, staring. The teenagers who'd been sitting in a beat-up Honda down the street scrambled out with their phones already recording because they knew they were witnessing something legendary. The Phantom's rear door opened and Robert Caldwell stepped out. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten their posture. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Derek made in 6 months, back when Derek actually had a job. His driver rushed around with an umbrella, but Robert wasn't worried about getting wet. He was looking directly at Sarah, kneeling in that mud, and his expression was breaking with every step he took towards her. "Sarah," Robert said, his voice carrying across the yard with the weight of 4 years of searching. "I found you. Finally, I found you." Inside the house, Derek must have been watching through the window because suddenly he's yanking open the front door, stepping onto the porch with confusion rapidly turning to panic on his face. "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" But Robert ignored him completely. He walked straight through the rain, letting his $1,000 shoes sink into the mud, letting his perfect suit get soaked, and knelt down beside Sarah like she was the only person in the world who mattered. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have found you sooner. I should have protected you better." Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Dad?" Saying it out loud made everything real in a way she wasn't prepared for. The word felt foreign on her tongue. She'd never called anyone that before. Derek's voice cracked when he spoke. "Dad? Sarah, what is he talking about? You said you grew up in foster care. You said you didn't have any family." That's when Robert finally turned to look at Derek. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Derek take an involuntary step backward. "What did you just say to my daughter?" Behind Robert, a second vehicle had pulled up, a black Escalade with 3 men in suits stepping out. They definitely weren't smiling. One of them was the size of a linebacker. Mrs. Chen found her voice loud and clear. "Sweet Jesus, that's the man from the news. That's Robert Caldwell, the billionaire. He owns half the tech companies in Phoenix." The color drained from Derek's face, going from angry red to ash gray as the reality of his situation crashed down on him like a collapsing building. "Mr. Caldwell, look, this is a misunderstanding," Derek stammered, his earlier bravado completely gone. Sarah and we had a fight, but couples fight all the time, and I didn't know she was your—" Robert cut him off with that same terrifyingly calm voice. "She told you she had no family, and you believed that gave you permission to treat her like she was disposable, like she was nothing." That word, nothing, hung in the air like an accusation. Derek had screamed it at Sarah 5 minutes ago, and now it was being quoted back to him by a man who could destroy his entire existence without breaking a sweat. Robert helped Sarah up as carefully as if she were made of glass, while one of his security team brought over a cashmere blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Another was already gathering her belongings from the mud. "I'm sorry I ran," Sarah said through her tears, 4 years ago. "I'm sorry I was scared." Robert's expression softened. "We have time for all of that. Right now we need to get you somewhere warm and dry." He looked back at Derek. "Do you have any of my daughter's belongings that aren't currently in the mud?" Derek stammered. "This is my house. She can't just—" One of Robert's security team stepped forward, the linebacker-sized one. His voice was professionally polite, but absolutely terrifying. "Sir, we can retrieve Mrs. Mitchell's belongings now with your cooperation, or we can return with the police and a court order in approximately 30 minutes. Which would you prefer?" Derek looked at the men, at the cars, at the neighbors now filling their yards and porches, at his phone blowing up with notifications because half the block was live streaming this moment. This would destroy what was left of his reputation. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Take whatever." As Robert guided Sarah towards the Rolls-Royce, she looked back once at the house where she'd spent 3 years feeling like a prisoner. Derek stood on the porch looking small and powerless and scared, exactly how he'd made her feel every single day of their marriage. The Phantom's interior was warm and quiet, the rain just a gentle sound against bulletproof glass. Robert sat beside her, holding her hand, not saying anything, just being there the way family should be. "How did you find me?" Sarah asked finally. Robert's answer changed everything. "I never stopped looking. 8 months ago, one of my investigators found a marriage license. Sarah Mitchell, married to Derek Thompson. I wanted to reach out immediately, but my security chief convinced me to wait, to observe, to make sure you were safe and happy before I disrupted your life." Sarah's eyes widened. "You've been watching me?" "For 8 months. And what I saw told me my daughter was in danger, so I came the moment you needed me. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know about your husband, something that's going to make you very—"
Through the rain-streaked window, Sarah watched her old life get smaller. The house, the neighborhood. Derek still standing on that porch, looking lost. She'd thought she was nothing, but it turned out she'd been everything all along. She just needed someone to remind her. The Caldwell estate in Paradise Valley looked like something from a movie. 3 stories of sandstone and glass lit up like a palace, with desert landscaping and mountain views stretching forever. Inside was even more overwhelming. Marble floors, artwork worth millions, a grand staircase curving up to the 2nd floor. But it wasn't cold. Family photos covered every surface. In there on the mantel was a silver-framed picture of a young woman holding a baby. "That's you," Robert said softly. "The fire station took it before they logged you into the system. It's the only picture I have of you and Catherine together. You have her smile." Sarah stared at the photo of the mother she'd never known, holding the baby she'd been, and something inside her chest cracked open. The guest suite was bigger than the entire house she'd shared with Derek. A bedroom with a king bed, a sitting room, a bathroom with a soaking tub, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights of Phoenix glittering below. Dr. Elena Martinez arrived within the hour, a distinguished woman in her 50s who examined Sarah thoroughly while Robert waited outside. Your blood pressure is elevated, which is understandable given tonight's stress, Dr. Martinez said, making notes on her tablet. The baby's heartbeat is strong and steady, but I'm concerned about you, Sarah. This level of sustained stress isn't good for either of you. She looked at Sarah with knowing eyes. Tonight wasn't the first time your husband hurt you, was it? Sarah's throat tightened. He never hit me. Dr. Martinez's expression showed she understood. Physical abuse isn't the only kind that matters, honey. Emotional and psychological abuse can be just as damaging, sometimes more so because the wounds are invisible. What came next was harder to hear than Sarah expected. While she'd been with the doctor, Robert's security team had been at Derek's house retrieving her belongings with a police escort, and they'd found things that made Sarah's blood run cold. Credit cards in her name that she didn't know about, bank statements showing purchases she'd never made, accounts that had been systematically emptied. Derek had been stealing from her for at least 2 years. Right now, it looks like approximately $83,000, Robert said gently, sitting beside her on the couch with printouts spread across the coffee table. Every penny you saved from your housekeeping jobs, he's been draining it the whole time. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $83,000. Every tip, every extra shift, every dollar she'd hidden away thinking she was building a future for herself and her baby. Derek had shown her account statements, told her they had almost $90,000 saved. Those statements were real, but he'd been forging her signature on withdrawal slips, taking cash advances on credit cards he'd opened in her name. Robert's head of security, Diana Foster, a former FBI agent with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, laid out the rest. There were also photos. Diana pulled out more documents. Derek with multiple women at bars, restaurants, hotels. Some of these are dated during your pregnancy. We also found dating profiles on 5 different apps, all listing him as single, with no children. Sarah felt like she was falling through the floor. But he told me he was working late. He said he was trying to get a promotion. Sarah, Robert said gently, taking her hand. He doesn't have a job. He was fired 4 months ago. The room spun. What? Diana pulled up documentation on her tablet. He was terminated from Valley Tech Solutions for sexual harassment, multiple complaints from female employees. He's been leaving the house every day pretending to go to work, but mostly he's been at bars or his friend's apartment. The money he stole from you, he's been using it to fund his lifestyle. Sarah couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years of thinking she was the problem. 3 years of him telling her she was worthless, lazy, stupid, and the whole time he was the one lying, stealing, cheating. I want to press charges, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. For everything, the fraud, the identity theft, all of it. Robert nodded. We will, and we'll make sure he never hurts you or anyone else again. Sarah looked at her father, the man she'd been too scared to accept 4 years ago. Why did you keep looking for me? After I ran, after I changed my number and disappeared, why didn't you just give up? Robert's eyes filled with tears. Because you're my granddaughter. Because Catherine was my daughter, and I failed her. I wasn't there when she needed me most. I didn't protect her. But I could protect you if I could just find you, so I never stopped searching. I had investigators in every major city. I had facial recognition software scanning social media. I spent millions of dollars and thousands of hours, and I would have spent millions more because you're family, and family doesn't give up on family. Sarah broke down completely, and Robert held her while she sobbed for the mother she'd never known, for the years she'd wasted being afraid, for the family she'd denied herself, for the abuse she'd endured, thinking she deserved it. While Sarah tried to sleep that first night in the mansion, Derek sat alone in his dark living room, surrounded by beer cans and the wreckage of his life. The videos had gone viral, millions of views. His phone had exploded with messages, his mother crying, his father refusing to speak to him, his brother texting that he was a disgrace, friends abandoning him in droves. But Derek's nightmare was just beginning, because Monday morning, Derek would discover exactly how much power a billionaire has when protecting his daughter. And it would destroy everything Derek had left.
Monday morning came too fast for Derek. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night reading comment after comment, tearing him apart online. The videos of him throwing Sarah out in the rain had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. News outlets had picked up the story. Local man kicks out pregnant wife, gets confronted by billionaire father-in-law was trending on 3 different platforms. Derek tried to salvage something, anything. He showered, put on his best shirt, and headed to the bar where he'd been spending his days. Maybe he could lay low there, wait for this to blow over. But the bartender stopped him at the door. "Derek, man, I can't let you in." "What? Why not?" The bartender looked uncomfortable. "The owner saw those videos, said you were bad for business, said people like you aren't welcome here anymore." The coffee shop down the street, the one where he'd been meeting women from those dating apps, had banned him too. "We don't serve people who abuse pregnant women," the manager said coldly. Derek's gym membership was canceled. His favorite restaurant refused to seat him. Everywhere he went, people recognized him from the videos. Some whispered, some pointed, some confronted him directly. "You're that guy," a woman shouted at him outside a convenience store. "You're the monster who threw out your pregnant wife." Derek tried to go to his friend's apartment, the place where he'd been crashing during his work hours, but his friend Marcus wouldn't even open the door. "Dude, my girlfriend saw those videos. She said if I let you in, she's leaving me. I can't help you, man. You're toxic." By Tuesday afternoon, Derek's landlord called. "Derek, we need to talk about the lease." "I told you, I'll have the rent next week." "It's not just about the rent anymore. I've had 3 separate tenants complain. They don't feel safe living in the same building as you. You've got 30 days to vacate." Derek sat in his dark living room and faced the truth. No job, no money, about to be evicted, facing criminal charges, a restraining order preventing him from contacting Sarah, friends abandoning him, reputation destroyed. He'd called Sarah nothing, but he was the one who had nothing left. Meanwhile, at the Caldwell estate, Sarah was discovering what it meant to be part of a family. Robert's wife, Margaret, Sarah's grandmother by marriage, had flown in from New York the day after the incident. She was an elegant woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a steel spine. "I'm so sorry we didn't find you sooner," Margaret said, embracing Sarah carefully. "But you're safe now. You're home, and we're never letting you go again." Robert's son, Christopher, Sarah's uncle, drove in from San Diego with his wife and 2 kids. "I always wanted a niece." He introduced Sarah to their cousins, who were instantly fascinated by their pregnant relative. But it was meeting her grandmother that truly broke Sarah's heart open. Rose Mitchell was 84 years old, Catherine's mother, the woman who'd raised Robert's wife after her own mother died. She'd been searching for her granddaughter for 18 years. "I knew Catherine was still alive out there somewhere," Rose said, holding Sarah's hands with tears streaming down her face. "I could feel it. A mother knows. And when they said she was gone, I prayed every single day that her baby was safe somewhere. And here you are, my beautiful girl. You look just like her." Rose pulled out a photo album filled with pictures of Catherine, laughing, dancing, playing piano, graduating high school. Sarah stared at the face that looked so much like her own and mourned the mother she'd never known. "She loved music," Rose said, "could play anything by ear, and she was so smart, so creative. But she was troubled too. The drugs, they took her from us before we could save her."
Sarah learned that Catherine had gotten mixed up with the wrong people as a teenager. She'd run away at 16, fallen into addiction, lived on the streets. By the time Robert's investigators found traces of her, she was already gone, overdosed in homeless shelter 6 months after Sarah was born. She left you at that fire station because she wanted you to have a chance. She wanted you to be safe. She loved you enough to give you up, Robert said. Sarah spent hours looking through photos, learning about the mother she'd never known, the family she'd been separated from, the life that should have been hers. But she also spent time planning for the future. "I want to help other women," Sarah told Robert and Margaret over dinner one night. "Women in situations like mine, who feel trapped, who think they're nothing." Robert smiled. "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation. Shelters, legal aid, counseling, job training, everything someone needs to escape an abusive relationship and build a new life." Margaret nodded approvingly. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Your mother would be proud. We can start setting it up immediately, whatever you need." But first, there was a legal battle to win. Bernard Crawford was the best attorney in Phoenix, maybe in the entire Southwest. He'd won cases against corporations, celebrities, and career criminals. Now he was sitting across from Sarah in his corner office, reviewing the evidence Diana had compiled. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen," Bernard said, flipping through documents. "Financial fraud, identity theft, emotional abuse, we have everything documented. But Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. Derek's attorney is going to come after you hard. They're going to paint you as a gold digger who trapped him, who's only claiming abuse now that you've reconnected with your wealthy father-in-law. It's going to get ugly."
Sarah sat in Bernard Crawford's office, the late afternoon Phoenix sun casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. Her hands rested protectively on her belly, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her mother's tension. "Let them come," Sarah said quietly. "I'm done being afraid." Bernard smiled, not his courtroom smile, but a genuine one. "Good, because we're going to need that strength. Derek's public defender is already filing motions trying to dismiss charges, claiming you're fabricating evidence, that the videos are taken out of context." "Out of context?" Sarah's voice rose. "He threw me out in the rain while I was 8 months pregnant." "I know, and the jury will see that too, but his attorney's job is to create doubt, to make you look like the villain instead of the victim." Bernard pulled out a legal pad. "Let's go through what to expect." Over the next hour, Bernard walked Sarah through the process. The criminal charges, fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation would be handled by the district attorney, but they were also pursuing a civil case for damages, restitution, and to ensure Derek could never claim parental rights. "The civil trial will come first," Bernard explained. "It's faster, and the burden of proof is lower. We'll establish the pattern of abuse, the financial crimes, everything. Then the criminal case will use that evidence." Diana Foster joined them, bringing more documentation. "We've interviewed 12 witnesses from your neighborhood. All of them are willing to testify about Derek's behavior, the yelling, the way he treated you, the incident in the rain. Mrs. Chen's testimony alone is devastating." "What about Derek's family?" asked Sarah. "Will they testify for him?" Diana shook her head. "His mother might, but his father and brother have both declined. His brother actually reached out to us, said he'd testify for you if needed. Apparently, Derek has a history of this behavior. There was an ex-girlfriend in college who filed a restraining order against him." Sarah felt sick. "So I wasn't the first." "No," Diana said gently, "but you'll be the last. We're making sure of that." Bernard walked Sarah through potential questions she'd face on the stand. "Derek's attorney will try to rattle you. He'll bring up the fact that you ran from your father 4 years ago, suggest you're mentally unstable or manipulative. He'll imply you got pregnant to trap Derek. He'll question why you didn't leave sooner if things were so bad." "Because I was scared.
because he made me believe I had nowhere to go, that I was nothing without him. Exactly, and that's what you'll tell the jury. The truth is your greatest weapon here. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah prepared for trial while also preparing for the baby. Dr. Martinez put her on modified bed rest due to elevated blood pressure. The stress of everything was taking its toll. But Sarah wasn't idle. She met with architects about plans for the foundation. She reviewed budgets with Robert's CFO. She conducted interviews with social workers and counselors who could help run programs. "You're supposed to be resting," Margaret chided gently, finding her at her laptop at midnight. "I can't just sit still," Sarah said. "If I stop moving, I start thinking about Derek, about the trial, about everything that went wrong. Planning the foundation, it helps me focus on what I can fix instead of what broke me." Margaret sat beside her. "Your mother was the same way. When things got hard, Catherine would throw herself into projects. She painted, she wrote music, she redesigned her bedroom 3 times in 1 year." Margaret smiled sadly. "I wish she'd lived long enough to get help, to heal. But Sarah, she would be so proud of who you've become." The night before the trial, the whole family gathered for dinner. Robert, Margaret, Christopher and his family, Grandma Rose, and several aunts and uncles Sarah was still learning to know. "I wish Catherine could see this," Grandma Rose said, tears in her eyes. Her daughter, surrounded by family, about to bring her own daughter into the world. This is what she wanted for you: safety, love, family. Sarah made a decision then. "When this is over, I want to use my inheritance to fund the foundation, all $50 million. Robert started to protest. "Sarah, that's your money. Your mother wanted you to have security." "And I will have security. I have family now. I have you. But that money can do so much more good helping other women who have nothing, women like I was 3 weeks ago. That's the security I want, knowing I'm making a difference." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "You're remarkable, you know that?" That night, Sarah stood in the nursery Robert had created, a beautiful room painted in soft yellows and greens, with a crib that had been custom-made, stuffed animals that cost more than Sarah used to make in a month, a rocking chair by the window overlooking the city lights. She thought about Derek, sitting in his empty house, facing everything he'd lost. Part of her, a very small part, felt sorry for him, but mostly she felt nothing. He'd made his choices. Now he would face the consequences. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you're better than me now? You think your billionaire daddy can protect you forever? You are still nothing. You'll always be nothing." Derek, violating the restraining order already. Sarah screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Diana, then blocked the number. Derek was desperate, lashing out, but his words didn't have power over her anymore. Because tomorrow, Sarah would walk into that courtroom and tell her truth, and Derek would finally face justice for everything he'd done. But neither of them knew that Derek had one more desperate move to make, one that would shock everyone and put Sarah in actual danger.
The Maricopa County Courthouse was packed when Sarah arrived with her family. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting questions as Bernard Crawford led them through the crowd. The story had captured national attention. Billionaire's daughter versus abusive husband was trending across every platform. Inside the courtroom, Sarah saw Derek for the first time since that night in the rain. He looked terrible, 20 pounds thinner, unshaven, wearing an ill-fitting suit his public defender must have loaned him. When Derek's eyes met Sarah's, something flickered across his face. Regret? Fear? Rage? She couldn't tell, and she no longer cared. Judge Patricia Hernandez entered, a Mexican-American woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation preceded her, tough on abusers, intolerant of legal games, and fair to a fault. "This is a civil case," Judge Hernandez announced. "Mitchell versus Thompson. We're here to determine liability for financial fraud, emotional damages, and to address questions of parental rights. Let's proceed." Bernard's opening statement was devastating. He walked the jury through 3 years of systematic abuse, the isolation, the verbal attacks, the financial exploitation. He showed the timeline of Derek's stealing, the forged signatures, the dating profiles, the lies about his job. Sarah Mitchell believed she was nothing because her husband told her so every single day. But Derek Thompson knew she was everything. Everything he could steal, everything he could exploit, everything he could destroy for his own benefit. This case is about a man who saw a vulnerable woman and decided to make her his victim. Derek's public defender, a young man named James Riley who looked overwhelmed by the attention, gave a weak opening. He argued that marriages are complicated, that financial arrangements between spouses are murky, that Sarah had memory issues about what really happened. Judge Hernandez's expression made clear what she thought of that argument. The first witness was Mrs. Chen. At 72 years old, with silver hair and a backbone of steel, she'd lived across from Sarah and Derek for 3 years. "Tell us what you observed about the Thompsons' marriage," Bernard prompted. Mrs. Chen didn't hesitate. "That man was cruel. I'd hear him through the windows, yelling, calling her names, telling her she was stupid and worthless. I saw him grab her arms so hard she had bruises. I saw her flinch when he walked into a room. And that night in the rain," Mrs. Chen's voice hardened, "that man threw his pregnant wife into a storm like she was garbage. I know abuse when I see it. That was abuse." On cross-examination, James tried to suggest Mrs. Chen was biased, that she only saw one side of things. "Young man," Mrs. Chen said sharply, "I've been married for 50 years. I know the difference between a couple's argument and abuse. What I witnessed was abuse, plain and simple." Next came the financial experts, forensic accountants who'd traced every dollar Derek had stolen. They walked the jury through the fraud with brutal clarity. $83,000 systematically drained over 2 years, including charges at jewelry stores and romantic restaurants on days when Derek claimed to be working late. "And these charges at the jewelry store?" Bernard asked. "Did Mrs. Mitchell receive any jewelry from those purchases?" "No," the accountant confirmed. "We cross-referenced the purchases with photos on Derek Thompson's dating profiles. The jewelry appears to have been given to other women." Gasps in the gallery. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. "Order!" Diana Foster's testimony was clinical and precise. She walked the court through the investigation, finding Derek's dating profiles, documenting his unemployment, discovering the pattern of lies. Mr. Thompson was fired for sexual harassment 4 months before the incident, multiple complaints from female employees, but he continued leaving home every morning, letting his wife believe he still had a job. Meanwhile, he was meeting women from dating apps and spending her money. James tried to attack Diana's methods. "Isn't it true that you conducted surveillance without Mr. Thompson's knowledge?" "We conducted surveillance from Mrs. Chen's property with her full permission," Diana corrected. "We recorded what could be seen from public view. Everything was legal." "But you work for Robert Caldwell. Isn't this all just a wealthy man trying to destroy his daughter's husband?" Diana's smile was cold. "Mr. Caldwell hired me to find his granddaughter. We found her being abused. We documented that abuse. If Derek Thompson feels destroyed by his own actions being brought to light, that's on him, not us." The lunch recess came just as Diana finished testifying. Sarah sat in a conference room with her family, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. "You're doing great," Robert assured her. "The jury can see the truth." But Sarah was nervous about the afternoon, because the afternoon was when she would take the stand. Bernard had prepared her, but preparation didn't stop the anxiety. She'd have to recount 3 years of abuse in front of strangers. She'd have to face Derek while describing how he'd destroyed her self-worth. She'd have to stay calm while James tried to make her look like a liar. "Remember, just tell the truth. Don't let him rattle you. The jury is already on your side. We just need them to keep them there." When court reconvened, Sarah took the stand. Her hand shook as she placed it on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Bernard started gently, establishing basic facts, how she and Derek met, when they married, when she got pregnant. Then he moved to the harder questions. "Sarah, when did you first realize something was wrong in your marriage?" Sarah took a breath and began to tell her story.
But as she testified, Sarah had no idea that Derek was about to make a desperate move that would shock the entire courtroom, a move so unexpected that even Judge Hernandez would be left speechless.
Sarah's voice was steady as she testified, despite the tears streaming down her face. Bernard guided her through 3 years of marriage with careful questions, letting the jury see the full picture of abuse. He started small, Sarah explained. Little comments about my clothes, my hair, the way I talked. He'd say he was just trying to help me improve. Then it got worse. He'd criticize everything, my cooking, my cleaning, my intelligence. He'd tell me I was lucky he put up with me, that no one else would want me. Did he ever physically hurt you? Bernard asked. He never hit me, Sarah said, but he'd grab my arm hard enough to leave bruises. He pushed me a few times, punched walls near my head, and the intimidation was constant. I was always walking on eggshells, always scared of setting him off. Bernard showed the jury photos Diana had taken, images of Sarah's bruised arms from weeks before the rain incident. When did you learn about the financial fraud? The night my father found me. His security team discovered what Derek had been doing. I felt so stupid. All that time, I thought we were saving money together, but he was stealing from me, spending it on other women, on gambling, on his lifestyle. James Riley stood for cross-examination, and Sarah braced. Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that you ran away from your biological father 4 years ago? Yes, Sarah admitted. Why would you run from a billionaire who wanted to help you? Sarah met his eyes. Because I was scared. I'd spent my whole life in foster care, bouncing between homes. I didn't know how to accept love from family. I thought there had to be a catch, that he'd abandoned me like everyone else had. It was my own fear and trauma, not anything to do with Derek. James pressed on. But you got pregnant pretty quickly after meeting Mr. Thompson, didn't you? Bernard stood. Objection? Relevance? Gets to motive, Your Honor, James argued. Mrs. Thompson may have gotten pregnant to trap my client. Judge Hernandez's eyes flashed with anger. Counsel, this woman is the victim of fraud and abuse. Unless you have evidence of pregnancy-related misconduct, move on. James pivoted. Mrs. Thompson, why didn't you leave sooner if things were so bad? Sarah had been expecting this. Because Derek made me believe I was nothing, that I couldn't survive without him, that my baby and I would end up homeless. He isolated me from the few friends I had. He controlled our finances, or at least I thought he did. When you're told every single day that you're worthless, you start to believe it, and when you're pregnant with nowhere to go, leaving seems impossible. But you had somewhere to go. You had a billionaire father. You just chose not to contact him. I didn't even know my father was looking for me, Sarah's voice rose with emotion. I thought I'd made my choice 4 years ago, that I'd burn that bridge. I didn't know he'd been searching, that he'd been trying to find me. If I'd known, I would have left Derek years ago. Bernard's redirect was powerful. Sarah, Derek called you nothing the night he threw you out. Do you believe that about yourself? No, Sarah said firmly, looking directly at the jury. I'm not nothing. I never was. I'm a survivor. I'm strong, and I'm going to make sure other women know they're not nothing too. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were wiping their eyes. As Sarah stepped down, Derek suddenly stood up. Sarah, please. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. Mr. Thompson, sit down. I just want to talk to her. Derek's voice was desperate. Sarah, I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Think about our baby. Security moved towards Derek, but he kept talking. You can't take my child from me. That's my baby. You have no right. Mr. Thompson, Judge Hernandez's voice was like thunder. You will sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and held in contempt. Derek sat, but his outburst had done exactly what Bernard wanted. The jury had just seen his volatility, his inability to control himself, even in court. The afternoon continued with more witnesses. Mr. Rodriguez testified about hearing Derek yell at Sarah.
A former neighbor from their old apartment building described similar incidents. A counselor who'd worked with abuse victims explained the psychological impact of Derek's treatment. Then came Derek's former coworkers. A woman named Jessica Martinez took the stand, her hands shaking. "Derek worked in my department," she testified. "He made inappropriate comments constantly. He'd cornered me in the break room 3 times, asking me out even though I told him I wasn't interested and that he was married. When I reported him to HR, he called me a liar and tried to get me fired." 2 other women testified with similar stories. Derek had been a serial harasser, using his position to pressure female employees. He'd finally been fired after a woman recorded him making explicit comments. And during all of this, Bernard pointed out, Derek went home every night to his pregnant wife and told her he was working late? "That's correct," Jessica confirmed. By the time court adjourned for the day, Derek's character was in shreds. But as everyone filed out, Diana pulled Bernard and Sarah aside. "We have a problem," Diana said quietly. "Derek's attorney just filed an emergency motion for emergency custody. He's claiming that Sarah is an unfit mother because of emotional instability and that the baby should be placed with him at birth." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "He can't." "He can file," Bernard said grimly, "and we'll fight it. But Sarah, there's something else." Diana's expression was grave. "Derek posted bond on his criminal charges an hour ago. Someone put up $50,000 for him. We don't know who, but he's out, and given his behavior in court today, I'm concerned about what he might do next."
That evening, security at the Caldwell estate was doubled. Robert wasn't taking any chances. 2 guards were posted at the main gate, 2 more patrolled the grounds, and Diana personally installed additional security cameras covering every angle of the property. "This is overkill," Sarah protested, watching the security team work. "Derek wouldn't actually try anything. He's stupid, but he's not that stupid." Diana's expression was skeptical. "Sarah, I've dealt with hundreds of domestic abusers. When they're backed into a corner, when they're losing control, that's when they're most dangerous. Derek has lost his job, his reputation, his home, and now he's losing in court. Men like him don't go quietly." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed, feeling the baby kick, thinking about the trial. Tomorrow would be Derek's turn to testify. She both dreaded and anticipated it. Dreaded having to sit through his lies, but anticipated watching Bernard tear those lies apart. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she looked at the message. "You think you're safe in that mansion? You think your daddy's money can protect you forever? I'll get my daughter back, one way or another." Sarah's hands shook as she forwarded the message to Diana and Bernard. Within minutes, Diana was at her door. "Pack a bag," Diana said. "We're moving you to a secure location until this is over." "What? No, I'm not running from Derek." "You're 9 months pregnant and he's making threats. We're not taking chances. Robert already has a safe house prepared. You'll be there tonight." The safe house was a luxury condo in downtown Phoenix, top floor of a secure building with 24-hour doormen in security. Sarah arrived with Diana, Margaret, and enough guards to protect a head of state. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, but she had to admit she felt safer here. Derek wouldn't even be able to get through the lobby. The next morning at trial, Derek took the stand in his own defense. It was a decision James had clearly advised against. You could see it in the public defender's expression, but Derek had insisted. Derek tried to present himself as a devoted husband who'd made mistakes but never meant any harm. He claimed Sarah had been emotionally manipulative, that she'd gotten pregnant deliberately to trap him, that her foster care background made her unstable. Bernard's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Thompson, you testified that your wife was manipulative, yet you opened credit cards in her name without her knowledge. Those were joint accounts." "Were they?" Bernard pulled out documents. "According to these applications, you forged Sarah's signature. That's not a joint account. That's identity theft." Derek fumbled.
I thought she'd be okay with it. You thought she'd be okay with you stealing $83,000 from her savings? It was our money. It was her money from her jobs in accounts with her name only. You systematically drained those accounts over 2 years. That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Thompson. That's theft. Bernard showed Derek's dating profiles. You told multiple women you were single with no children while your wife was pregnant. Derek's face flushed. Those profiles were just for fun. Fun? You met up with at least 8 different women according to your GPS history. You took them to restaurants using money stolen from your wife. You bought them jewelry using credit cards fraudulently opened in your wife's name. That's not fun, Mr. Thompson. That's betrayal. The jury was watching Derek with open disgust. Several of them were shaking their heads. Bernard pulled up Derek's employment records. You were fired 4 months before you threw your wife out, yet you left the house every morning pretending to go to work. Where were you actually going? Derek's face went red. I was networking, looking for jobs. You were at bars by 11 a.m. according to credit card receipts. You were at your friend's apartment playing video games. You were meeting women from dating apps. You were anywhere except looking for work while your pregnant wife believed you were supporting your family. I was trying. You weren't trying, Mr. Thompson. You were lying, systematically, about everything. Your job, your fidelity, your finances. You built your entire marriage on lies. Bernard pulled up the videos from the night in the rain. The jury watched Derek scream at Sarah, throw her belongings into the mud, shove her when she begged him to stop. You called your wife nothing multiple times. Why? Derek's jaw clenched. I was angry. Angry enough to throw your 8-month pregnant wife in a storm? She burned dinner. She burned dinner, and your response was to kick her out of her home while she was pregnant? Bernard's voice rose. What kind of man does that, Mr. Thompson? Derek tried to recover. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, you were thinking very clearly. You were thinking that Sarah had no family, no resources, nowhere to go. You thought you had complete power over her. You thought you could treat her like garbage and face no consequences. Bernard paused. But then Robert Caldwell showed up, and suddenly you realized you'd made a terrible mistake. Not because you'd abused your wife, but because you'd abused someone who wasn't as powerless as you thought. The courtroom was silent. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Hernandez called for a recess. As the courtroom cleared, Derek stared at Sarah with an expression that made her blood cold. Not regret, not remorse, pure hatred. Diana saw it too. We need to increase security, she said immediately. That man is dangerous. But they had no idea just how dangerous Derek had become, because that night, Derek would make a move that would put not just Sarah, but her entire family at risk and reveal that he'd been planning something terrible all along.
The final day of trial arrived with tension thick enough to cut. Sarah had barely slept in the secure condo, jumping at every sound despite the security detail outside her door. The baby seemed to sense her stress, kicking more frequently, more urgently. Dr. Martinez had visited the night before, checking Sarah's blood pressure and frowning at the results. You need to rest, she'd ordered. The stress isn't good for either of you. After today, I want you on strict bed rest until delivery. Now, sitting in the courtroom with her family surrounding her, Sarah felt the weight of everything pressing down. This was it. After today, the jury would decide. Bernard's closing argument was powerful and devastating. He stood before the jury with quiet intensity, laying out the case piece by piece. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is fundamentally about power and control. Derek Thompson saw a vulnerable woman, a woman who'd grown up in foster care, who'd been abandoned by everyone who should have protected her, and he decided to exploit that vulnerability. He didn't love Sarah Mitchell. He used her. He isolated her from the few friends she had. He controlled what she wore, who she talked to, where she went. He verbally abused her daily, telling her she was stupid, worthless, nothing,
and he did it deliberately, systematically, to destroy her self-esteem so she'd believe she couldn't survive without him. Then he stole from her $83,000 over 2 years, money she'd earned scrubbing floors while pregnant, money she'd saved for their baby's future. He forged her signature, opened credit cards in her name, drained her accounts, and spent that money on other women, on gambling, on maintaining a lifestyle built entirely on lies. And when his house of lies started crumbling, he threw her out like garbage. 8 months pregnant, in a rainstorm, with nothing. He called her nothing, because that's what he needed her to believe, that she was nothing without him. But Sarah Mitchell is not nothing. She's not a victim anymore. She's a survivor, and she's asking you to hold Derek Thompson accountable for what he's done, not just to her, but to every woman he's hurt, every person he's lied to, every law he's broken. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. It's about saying that abuse has consequences, that fraud has consequences, that treating another human being like they're disposable has consequences. Find for Sarah Mitchell, award her full restitution, award her damages, and send a message that this kind of abuse will not be tolerated. The jury was riveted. Several were openly crying. James Riley's closing was far weaker. He tried to paint Derek as a flawed man who'd made mistakes, argued that marriages are complicated, suggested that Sarah's reconnection with her wealthy father colored her memory of events. Maybe things weren't as bad as she remembers, James suggested. Maybe... He was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the courtroom. Derek had stood up, face red with rage. "This is bullshit," Derek shouted. "She's lying. She got pregnant on purpose. She trapped me, and now she's stealing my kid with her rich daddy's lawyers." Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. "Mr. Thompson, sit down immediately." "I won't sit down. That's my baby, mine, and I'll get her back. I don't care what this court says." Security was moving toward Derek, but he kept shouting, "You think you won, Sarah? You think you're safe? I'll..." 4 security officers tackled Derek before he could finish the sentence. They dragged him from the courtroom while he screamed threats and obscenities. Judge Hernandez's face was carved from stone. "Mr. Riley, your client has just threatened the plaintiff in open court. I'm holding him in contempt and ordering him held without bail pending the outcome of these proceedings." She looked at the jury. "Please disregard Mr. Thompson's outburst. We'll recess for 15 minutes. In the conference room, Sarah was shaking. "Did you hear what he said? He said he'd get her back. My baby. He was threatening my baby." Robert held her hand. "He's in custody now. He can't hurt you." But Diana's expression was troubled. "Something's off. Derek isn't smart enough to plan anything sophisticated, but that outburst seemed almost deliberate, like he wanted to be held in contempt." "Why would he want that?" Bernard asked. Diana shook her head. "I don't know, but I don't like it." When court reconvened, Judge Hernandez addressed the jury. "Given Mr. Thompson's outburst and his removal from the courtroom, we'll proceed directly to jury deliberation. Please retire to the jury room and reach your verdict." The wait was agonizing. Sarah sat with her family in the conference room, unable to eat, barely able to breathe. Margaret held her hand, Robert paced, Christopher kept checking his phone for updates. Diana stood by the door, talking quietly into her radio. Her expression grew more concerned with each passing minute. After only 90 minutes, the jury returned. That was fast. Too fast for deliberation if they'd been uncertain. The courtroom reassembled. Derek was present via video link from Holding, his face still flushed with anger, his jaw clenched. The jury foreman stood, a middle-aged black woman who'd watched the entire trial with sharp, intelligent eyes. "In the case of Mitchell versus Thompson, we find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." Sarah's knees went weak. Robert gripped her arm to steady her. "We award the plaintiff full restitution of $83,000 plus interest. Additionally, we award $300,000 in compensatory damages and $500,000 in punitive damages." Sarah couldn't breathe. $883,000 total. The foreman continued.
We further recommend that the criminal complaints be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and that Mr. Thompson's parental rights be terminated permanently." Judge Hernandez nodded. "So ordered. Mr. Thompson, you are ordered to pay the judgment in full. I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. You are not to contact Ms. Mitchell directly or indirectly, ever. You are not to come within 1,000 feet of her or any member of her family. You will not be listed on the birth certificate. You will have no custody, no visitation, no parental rights whatsoever." Derek's face on the video screen twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," he screamed. "All of you, you have no idea what's coming." And as security cut off his video feed, Diana's radio crackled with an urgent message that made her face go pale. "We have a problem," she said quietly. "Derek's friend Marcus just entered the courthouse, and he's not here for the trial."
Diana moved fast, one hand on Sarah's arm, the other on her radio. "Get them to conference room B, now. Lock it down." Security personnel appeared from nowhere, forming a protective circle around Sarah and her family as they were hustled down a side corridor. Sarah's heart pounded, the baby kicking frantically as if sensing danger. "What's happening?" Robert demanded. Marcus Peterson was Derek's roommate when Derek was supposedly at work. We flagged him during our investigation. He helped Derek hide money, gave him alibis, but he left town 2 weeks ago. The fact that he's back now, right after Derek's outburst, she shook her head. It's not a coincidence. They reached the conference room. Diana positioned guards at the door while pulling up security footage on her tablet. There, Marcus, walking through the courthouse lobby, hands in his jacket pockets, looking around nervously. "He's carrying something," one of the security team noted. "Left pocket, could be a weapon." Diana spoke into a radio. "This is Foster, subject of interest in the main lobby. White male, 6'2", brown jacket, possible weapon. Do not approach, observe and track." Sarah sank into a chair, her breath coming in short gasps. Margaret knelt beside her. "Breathe, honey. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Think about the baby." "Why is this happening?" Sarah whispered. "The trial is over. We won. Why won't he just leave me alone?" "Because men like Derek don't accept losing," Diana said, still watching the tablet. "They can't handle their victims escaping. It's not about love or family, it's about control. And right now, Derek has lost all control, so he's lashing out however he can." On the tablet, Marcus was being intercepted by courthouse security, a brief conversation. Then Marcus pulled something from his pocket. "Phones down," Diana ordered sharply. But it wasn't a weapon. It was an envelope. Marcus handed it to security and left, walking quickly toward the exit. Diana's radio crackled again. "Subject has departed. Package secured. Contents appear to be documents only." 10 tense minutes later, a deputy brought the envelope to the conference room. Diana examined it carefully before opening it. Inside were printouts, photos clearly taken recently, showing Sarah leaving the secure condo, entering Dr. Martinez's office, walking through the courthouse parking garage. "He's been following you," Diana said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That son of a—" Robert's face went dark with fury. "There's a note," Diana interrupted, pulling out a handwritten letter. She read it aloud. "You think your father's money makes you untouchable? You think you can steal my daughter and face no consequences? I know where you sleep. I know where you go. I know you're alone in that condo at night. Enjoy your victory, Sarah. It won't last long." The room went silent, except for Sarah's ragged breathing. "That's a terroristic threat," Bernard said immediately. "That's witness intimidation. Judge Hernandez needs to see this now." Within an hour, they were back in the courtroom. Derek was brought back via video link, this time with 3 guards visible in the frame. Judge Hernandez's expression could have frozen lava. "Mr. Thompson, did you have your friend Marcus Peterson deliver threatening materials to this courthouse today?" Derek's smile was cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're under oath, Mr. Thompson. And I'm telling the truth. If Marcus came to the courthouse, that's his business. I can't control what my friends do." Judge Hernandez held up the photos.
These are surveillance photos of the plaintiff taken over the past 3 days. The note accompanying them constitutes a direct threat. You're telling me this is a coincidence? Derek shrugged. Marcus probably wanted to see how she's doing. He's concerned about the baby, my baby, that she's trying to steal. Your parental rights have been terminated, Mr. Thompson, by a corrupt court protecting a rich man's daughter, Derek spat. This whole thing is a joke. You're a joke. This system is a joke. Judge Hernandez's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Mr. Thompson, I'm adding additional charges of contempt, witness intimidation, and terroristic threatening. Your bail is permanently revoked. You will be held in county jail pending your criminal trial, and I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation before your next appearance. You can't. You can, and I have. Remove him. Derek's video feed showed him lunging at the guards before the screen went black. In the conference room afterward, Diana laid out a new security plan. Sarah, you're not going back to the condo. It's compromised. We're moving you to the estate permanently with full security detail all the clock. No one gets in without clearance. No one. What about Marcus? Christopher asked. Is he being charged? Phoenix PD is picking him up now. We'll see what he knows. But Sarah, you need to understand, Derek is escalating. The outburst in court, the surveillance, the threats, this isn't random. He's planning something. That night, back at the Caldwell estate, Sarah couldn't sleep despite the exhaustion weighing on her. Every sound made her jump. The baby seemed as restless as she was, moving constantly. Dr. Martinez came by at midnight to check on her. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, she said gravely. Sarah, the stress is putting you and the baby at risk. If we can't get this under control, we may need to induce labor early. How early? You're at 38 weeks, medically safe, but not ideal. Let's give it 48 hours. If your blood pressure doesn't come down, we induce. Understood? Sarah nodded numbly. Everything was happening too fast. The trial, the verdict, Derek's threats, and now possibly giving birth early. Marguerite stayed with her that night, sitting in a chair by the bed, keeping watch like a guardian angel. Rest, sweetheart. We're all here. You're safe. Derek can't hurt you anymore. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. And at 3 a.m., when Diana burst into the room with her weapon drawn, Sarah realized her instincts had been right, because the police had just found Marcus Peterson dead in his apartment, and the evidence pointed to Derek having ordered a hit from jail, which meant he had help on the outside, help that was still out there and still hunting.
The estate erupted into controlled chaos. More security arrived within minutes. Every entrance was locked down. Patrol routes were doubled. Diana had her entire team working through the night, tracking down every person Derek had been in contact with over the past year. Marcus was killed execution style, Diana explained to the family at 4 a.m. Everyone gathered in Robert's study. Single gunshot to the back of the head. Professional. Which means Derek has connections we didn't know about. How is that possible? Christopher demanded. He's a loser who lived off his wife. Where would he get money for a hit? That's what we're trying to figure out. Diana pulled up files on her laptop. We're going through his phone records, his emails, everything. If he's working with someone, we'll find them. Sarah sat on the couch, hands on her belly, feeling the baby kick. The stress was overwhelming. Her back ached, her head pounded, and something else, a tightening sensation she'd been feeling on and off since midnight. Margaret noticed. Sarah, sweetheart, what's wrong? I'm not sure. I keep getting these cramps, but they're probably just stress. Dr. Martinez, who'd stayed at the estate overnight, came over immediately. She examined Sarah quickly, then met Margaret's eyes with concern. Those aren't stress cramps. Those are contractions. Sarah, you're in early labor. The room went silent. But I'm only 38 weeks, Sarah protested. You said 48 hours. The stress triggered it, Dr. Martinez said. Your body has decided it's time. We need to get you to the hospital now. Diana was already on her radio, coordinating.
We need a secure route to Banner Health. I want 3 vehicles, 2 decoys. No one can know which car she's in."
"This is insane," Sarah said, but another contraction hit, stronger this time, making her gasp. 30 minutes later, they were moving. Sarah was in the middle SUV with Dr. Martinez, Margaret, and 2 security guards. Robert and Christopher were in the lead vehicle. Diana was in the rear, coordinating the entire operation. The drive to Banner Health Center in downtown Phoenix was tense. Sarah's contractions were 8 minutes apart and getting stronger. She gripped Margaret's hand, trying to breathe through the pain, while watching the city lights blur past. "We're going to get you there safe," Margaret promised, "and you're going to have a beautiful, healthy baby. Derek can't touch you." But as they pulled into the hospital parking garage, Diana's radio crackled with alarming news. "We've got a silver sedan following us, 2 occupants, keeping distance but definitely tailing us." Diana's voice was ice cold. "Lose them, now." The convoy split up. Sarah's SUV went to the emergency entrance, while the other 2 vehicles led the sedan away. Hospital security was waiting, along with PNPD officers that Diana had coordinated with. Sarah was rushed inside, through a private entrance, directly to the maternity ward. The hospital had been alerted. She was registered under a false name, her room number unlisted, security posted outside her door. But Sarah barely noticed the precautions. The contractions were 4 minutes apart now, and the pain was overwhelming. She'd thought she was prepared, had read all the books, watched all the videos. Nothing had prepared her for this. "You're doing great," Dr. Martinez coached. "Remember your breathing, in through your nose, out through your mouth." Margaret stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. Robert paced in the hallway outside, refusing to leave despite the danger. Hours passed. The contractions got closer, stronger. Sarah screamed through some of them, gritting her teeth through others. Outside, Diana coordinated with hospital security and police, tracking down the sedan's occupants, who turned out to be private investigators Derek had somehow hired before his arrest. They were detained for questioning. But there was still someone unaccounted for, someone who'd helped Derek arrange Marcus's murder, someone who might still be coming for Sarah and baby Emily. At 2 p.m., after 10 hours of labor, Dr. Martinez said the words Sarah had been waiting for. "You're fully dilated. It's time to push." The next 40 minutes were the hardest of Sarah's life, pain beyond anything she'd imagined. Margaret's voice in her ear encouraging her, telling her she was strong. Dr. Martinez guiding her through each contraction, each push. And then a cry, a beautiful, perfect, angry cry. "It's a girl," Dr. Martinez announced, lifting the squirming, red-faced baby. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Sarah sobbed as they placed her daughter on her chest. Tiny, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that blinked up at her like she was trying to figure out this strange new world. "Hi, baby girl. Hi, sweetheart. I'm your mama. You're safe now. I promise. You're safe." Margaret was crying. Robert, who'd been allowed in after the delivery, was crying. Even the nurses had tears in their eyes. "What's her name?" Dr. Martinez asked, filling out paperwork. Sarah looked at her daughter, this perfect human being she'd created, who'd survived everything, the abuse, the stress, the fear, this baby that represented hope and new beginnings and everything good that could come from darkness. "Emily," Sarah said. "Emily Catherine Mitchell." Catherine for the mother she'd never known, Emily because it meant industrious and striving, and this little girl had definitely striven to get here safely. For the next hour, Sarah held Emily, memorizing every detail, her tiny fingers, her perfect nose, the way she made little mewing sounds, the way she smelled like innocence and possibility. But outside the maternity ward, Diana received a text that made her blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, sent from a burner phone. "Congratulations on the baby, Sarah. I'll meet her soon.
Very soon, because I'm already in the hospital. Diana's head snapped up, scanning the hallway. Derek's accomplice wasn't just out there somewhere. They're here, in the hospital, right now, and they're coming for Sarah and baby Emily.
Diana's radio crackled to life. Lockdown, now. We have a hostile in the building. Lock down the maternity ward immediately. Alarms blared. Doors slammed shut automatically. Hospital security swarmed the floor, checking every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Sarah looked up from Emily in confusion. What's happening? Margaret moved between Sarah and the door instinctively. Diana? Diana was at the door now, weapon drawn, speaking rapidly into her radio. Get me security footage from every entrance for the past 2 hours. I want facial recognition running on every person who entered this building, and get Phoenix SWAT here now. Pulled Christopher into Sarah's room. Stay with them. Don't open this door for anyone except me or Diana. Understood? The next 30 minutes were a nightmare. Sarah held Emily close, the baby blissfully sleeping through the chaos, while armed guards took positions outside her door. Other patients were evacuated from the ward. Doctors and nurses were escorted to secure areas. Diana reviewed security footage with hospital security, tracking everyone who'd entered the building. Then she found it, a woman in scrubs, wearing a surgical mask, entering through the emergency department 90 minutes ago. The same woman who appeared briefly on a camera near the maternity ward 20 minutes ago, before disappearing. Who is she? Robert demanded. Diana ran the facial recognition. The mask was difficult, but the system got a hit. Amanda Chen, Derek's ex-girlfriend from college, the one who filed the restraining order. Why would she help him? She hated him. Diana pulled up more records. She didn't. Look at this. She was Derek's first victim. He abused her for 2 years in college. After the restraining order, she had a breakdown, dropped out of school, and 3 months ago, Diana's face went grim. Derek contacted her. We have emails. He convinced her that Sarah was the problem, that Sarah had stolen his life, that if they worked together, they could both get revenge. He manipulated another victim to help him, Sarah breathed in horror. He turned a woman he'd abused into his accomplice. Classic abuser tactic. Find someone vulnerable and twist them into doing what you want. She spoke into a radio. Suspect is Amanda Chen, posing as medical staff, armed and dangerous. Find her. Amanda was cornered 15 minutes later in a supply closet 3 doors down from Sarah's room. She had a stolen nurse's badge, a syringe full of sedatives, and a bag packed with baby clothes. She was planning to drug Sarah and take Emily, Diana explained afterward, her voice tight with controlled fury. Derek's plan was for Amanda to bring the baby to him somehow. He honestly believed he could pull this off. Amanda was taken away in handcuffs, crying and screaming that Derek had promised they could be a family, that they'd raise the baby together, that Sarah had ruined everything. Sarah held Emily closer, unable to process how close they'd come to disaster. Is it over? Is it finally over? Diana's expression softened. Derek is in maximum security now. No visitors, no phone calls, complete isolation. Amanda is going to prison. Marcus is dead. Everyone who helped Derek is accounted for. Yes, Sarah, it's over. You're safe. Emily is safe. That night, with extra security still posted, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. Emily nursed for the first time, and Sarah marveled at the tiny human she had created, so perfect, so innocent, completely unaware of the drama surrounding her birth. She's beautiful, Sarah said, sitting beside the bed. She looks just like you, like Catherine, too. Robert leaned down to kiss his granddaughter's head. She's perfect, and she's going to grow up safe, loved, and strong. Everything you deserved, Sarah. Everything Catherine deserved. The next 3 days in the hospital were peaceful. Family came to visit. Christopher's kids excited to meet their new cousin, Grandma Rose crying happy tears, aunts and uncles bringing gifts. Mrs. Chen even showed up with a handmade quilt she'd been working on for months. I knew that girl would be all right, Mrs. Chen said, looking at Emily. I knew she'd get her happy ending.
Bernard visited with legal papers. Derek's criminal trial is scheduled for next month. Given everything that happened, Marcus's murder, Amanda's attempted kidnapping, the DA is going for maximum sentences. He's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. Good, Sarah said, simply. She felt no satisfaction, no revenge, just relief. Derek would be in prison. He couldn't hurt anymore. On the day Sarah was discharged, a crowd of news reporters waited outside. Diana had anticipated this, arranging for a decoy exit and getting Sarah and Emily through a service entrance. But Sarah stopped her. "No," Sarah said. "I want to make a statement. Not about Derek. I'm done giving him attention. But I want to talk about the foundation, about helping other women." So Sarah stood in front of the cameras with Emily in her arms, her family surrounding her, and spoke from the heart. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was nothing. My husband told me I was nothing, and I believed him. But I was wrong, and he was wrong. Every woman who's been abused, every woman who feels trapped, every woman who thinks she's alone, I want you to know you're not nothing. You're everything, and there are people who want to help. The Catherine Caldwell Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors will be opening in Phoenix next month. We'll provide shelter, legal aid, counseling, job training, everything a woman needs to escape abuse and build a new life, because no one should feel as alone as I felt, and no one should believe the lies their abuser tells them. The applause from the reporters was unprecedented. The video went viral within hours, and within days, Sarah was receiving messages from women all over the country, thanking her, asking for help, sharing their own stories. But the story that would truly change everything, the story that would turn Sarah's foundation into a nationwide movement, was still 6 months away, because Derek was about to face justice. And what came out during his criminal trial would shock even those who thought they knew how evil he truly was.
6 months after Emily's birth, Derek Thompson sat in an orange jumpsuit in the Maricopa County courtroom, looking nothing like the man who'd thrown Sarah out in the rain. He'd lost 30 pounds, his hair was graying, his eyes were hollow. The criminal trial lasted 2 weeks. Unlike the civil case, this wasn't about money or custody. This was about Derek going to prison for what he'd done. The charges were extensive: fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, terroristic threatening, and violation of a restraining order. Each charge carried years in prison. The evidence was overwhelming. Diana's investigation had uncovered everything: emails showing Derek manipulating Amanda, recorded jailhouse conversations where Derek discussed getting rid of Marcus. Marcus had been planning to testify against him. Financial records proving systematic theft. But what shocked everyone, including Sarah, was what they found when they searched Derek's computer. Diana testified about discovering a folder labeled Plan B. Inside were detailed notes about Sarah's daily routine from years before Derek had even thrown her out. He'd been tracking her movements, her schedule, her activities. He documented her interactions with neighbors, what time she left for doctor appointments, when she was home alone. This wasn't impulsive abuse, the prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Reynolds, argued. This was calculated, systematic, predatory behavior. Derek Thompson didn't just abuse his wife. He stalked her, studied her, planned how to control her completely. There were also notes about Robert Caldwell. Derek had known about Sarah's billionaire father. Months before that night in the rain, Derek had discovered articles about Robert's missing granddaughter. He'd seen photos of Catherine. He'd figured out the connection. Mr. Thompson knew exactly who his wife was. He knew she was the missing Caldwell heiress. He knew she was worth millions, and his plan was to keep her pregnant, isolated, and dependent,
that eventually force her to contact her father and demand money as ransom. Sarah sat in the gallery, holding 6-month-old Emily, listening to this in horror. Derek hadn't just been abusive, he'd been planning to extort her family. That's why he stole her savings. That's why he kept her financially dependent. He wanted her desperate enough that when he finally let her reconnect with her father, she'd do anything he said, including asking Robert Caldwell for millions of dollars. Derek's defense attorney tried to argue that the notes were just fantasy, that Derek had never actually intended to go through with it, but the jury wasn't buying it. Witness after witness testified. Jessica Martinez and the other women Derek had harassed, his former boss explaining why Derek was fired, the forensic accountants detailing the theft, Amanda Chen testifying in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing how Derek had manipulated her. He told me Sarah had stolen his life. He said she'd trapped him with a baby, that she was poisoning his daughter against him. I made him believe I was helping save a child from an evil woman. I was so stupid. I believed him because he'd been my victim once too, and somehow he made me into his weapon. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked sympathetic toward Amanda, another of Derek's victims, manipulated into becoming his accomplice. When Derek took the stand in his own defense, he showed no remorse. He blamed Sarah for abandoning her family. He blamed Robert for interfering in their marriage. He blamed the justice system for being biased against men. He never once took responsibility for anything he'd done. The prosecutor's closing argument was devastating. Derek Thompson is a predator. He hunts vulnerable women, isolates them, exploits them, and when they try to escape, he destroys them. He stole from Sarah Mitchell, he abused her for years, he threw her out while she was pregnant, he arranged Marcus Peterson's murder to keep him quiet, he manipulated Amanda Chen into attempting to kidnap an infant. And throughout all of this, he has shown zero remorse, zero accountability, zero recognition that what he did was wrong. Because in Derek Thompson's mind, he's the victim. He's the one who was wronged, and that makes him dangerous. That makes him someone who will do this again if given the chance. Don't give him that chance. Find him guilty on all counts. Give him the maximum sentence. Protect every woman he might encounter in the future. Protect society from Derek Thompson. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek's face showed nothing. No emotion. No reaction. He just stared at the table while the verdicts were read. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Judge Maria Rodriguez, who'd presided over the trial with stern fairness, handed down her ruling. Mr. Thompson, I've been a judge for 18 years. I have seen murderers, rapists, child abusers, and career criminals, but I have rarely seen someone with as little capacity for remorse or growth as you've demonstrated. You are a danger to every woman you encounter. You are manipulative, cruel, and utterly self-centered. For the fraud and identity theft charges, I sentence you to 10 years. For the conspiracy to commit murder, 20 years. For the attempted kidnapping conspiracy, 15 years. For all remaining charges, an additional 5 years. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. You will serve 50 years in the Arizona State Prison, with no possibility of parole for 30 years. By the time you're eligible for release, you'll be 81 years old. And Mr. Thompson, I hope you use every single day of those 50 years to reflect on what you've done and become a better person, though I doubt you will. Derek was led away in chains. He didn't look at Sarah. Didn't look at anyone. As Sarah left the courthouse with Emily in her arms, reporters shouted questions, but Sarah didn't answer.
She just walked to the car where her family waited, feeling nothing but relief. It was over. Finally, completely over. And now Sarah could focus on what really mattered: her daughter, her family, and building something meaningful from the wreckage Derek had left behind. The foundation was thriving, and Sarah's next chapter was about to begin.
1 year after that night in the rain, the Catherine Caldwell Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors opened its doors in 3 locations across Phoenix. Sarah stood at the main center, a beautiful building in central Phoenix with shelter space for 50 women, a legal clinic, counseling offices, child care facilities, and job training programs. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was packed with supporters, donors, politicians, and most importantly, women who'd been helped by the foundation's services in the months leading up to the official opening. Sarah stood at the podium with Emily, now walking and babbling constantly, on her hip. The crowd quieted as she began to speak. 1 year ago, I was on my knees in the mud, believing I was nothing, because that's what my abuser told me every day for 3 years. I had nowhere to go, no resources, no hope. I truly believed I deserved what was happening to me. But I was wrong. And every woman who's been in that situation, who's believed the lies, who's felt trapped, who's thought she was alone, needs to hear this. You are not nothing. You have never been nothing. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. Your value is inherent, unchangeable, and absolute. This foundation exists to prove that to every woman who walks through these doors. We're not just offering shelter and services, we're offering proof that you deserve better, that better exists, and that you can build it for yourself with the right support. My mother, Catherine, never got that chance. She died believing she was lost and alone, when in reality she had a family desperately searching for her. This foundation is named in her honor, but it's dedicated to making sure no woman ever feels as lost as she did, or as lost as I did kneeling in that mud. Sarah's voice broke slightly. We helped 97 women in our first 6 months of operation. 97 women who found the courage to leave, to fight, to rebuild. 18 of them are here today. And I want each of you to stand up so everyone can see what courage looks like. Throughout the crowd, women stood, young, old, different races, different backgrounds. Some had children with them. All of them had survived. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Sarah spent hours talking with donors, supporters, and women interested in the programs. Margaret worked the crowd like the skilled socialite she was, connecting wealthy donors with the foundation's needs. Robert discussed expansion plans with city officials. They wanted to open centers in Tucson and Flagstaff within 2 years. But the most meaningful moment came when a young woman approached Sarah nervously. She couldn't have been more than 22, with a black eye partially hidden by makeup and a toddler clinging to her leg. "Miss Mitchell? I'm Rachel. I saw your interview after the trial, the one where you talked about believing you were nothing." Tears filled her eyes. "I've been with my boyfriend for 4 years. He hits me. He steals from me. He tells me I'm worthless. And I've been believing him because I didn't think I had anywhere to go." Sarah's heart broke. She knelt down to be eye level with Rachel's daughter, then stood and looked Rachel in the eyes. "You have somewhere to go now, right here, right now if you want. We have beds available, legal help ready, counselors waiting. You don't have to go back to him, not tonight, not ever." Rachel broke down sobbing. "I don't have any money." "You don't need money. Everything is free. That's the whole point. You just need the courage to walk through that door." Rachel looked at the foundation building, then at her daughter, then at Sarah. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll do it." Sarah walked Rachel inside personally, introducing her to the intake coordinator, making sure she knew she was safe. 2 hours later,
Rachel and her daughter were settled in a private room, eating dinner, with a protection order being filed and a safety plan in place. "That's 98, Diana said, appearing beside Sarah. Diana had left her security position to become the Foundation's director of operations. 98 women in 7 months. "It's not enough," Sarah said, watching Rachel play with her daughter in the common area. "And we'll help them too, one at a time, one day at a time." Diana smiled. "You're building something incredible, Sarah, something that will outlast all of us." That evening at the Caldwell estate, the family gathered for dinner. It had become a weekly tradition, everyone together, celebrating small victories and supporting each other through challenges. Emily toddled around the table, visiting everyone, demanding attention. She had Robert wrapped around her tiny finger. Christopher's kids adored their little cousin. Grandma Rose spent hours reading to her. Sarah watched her daughter, this perfect human being who would grow up surrounded by love, security, and family. Everything Sarah never had, everything Catherine never had, but everything Emily would always have. "I got something today," Sarah announced during dessert. She pulled out a letter. "It's from Amanda Chen." The table went quiet. "She's in prison, serving 8 years, but she's been going to therapy, working on herself. She wrote to apologize, actually apologize, not like Derek's fake apologies. She takes full responsibility for what she did. She acknowledges Derek manipulated her, but that she still made the choice to help him." "Are you going to write back?" Margaret asked carefully. Sarah thought about it. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to, because Amanda is another one of Derek's victims, even if she also became his accomplice. Maybe someday, when I'm ready." Robert raised his glass. "To second chances, to new beginnings, to family." "To family," everyone echoed. After dinner, Sarah stood in Emily's nursery watching her daughter sleep. The baby monitor glowed softly on the dresser. Outside, security patrolled the grounds, not because there was still danger, but because Diana was thorough. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Bernard. "Final asset seizure complete. Derek's truck and remaining belongings sold at auction. Proceeds going to Foundation. He officially has nothing left." Sarah smiled slightly. Derek had called her nothing. Now he actually was nothing, sitting in a prison cell for the next 30 years, stripped of everything he'd stolen, forgotten by everyone who'd once known him. But Sarah was everything. She had family, she had purpose, she had Emily, she had a foundation changing lives. Derek had tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd made her stronger. And now Sarah was using that strength to help hundreds of other women discover their own power. Because being called nothing by someone who is nothing means absolutely nothing. And Sarah would spend the rest of her life making sure every woman knew that truth.
5 years after that night in the rain, Sarah sat in her office at the Catherine Caldwell Foundation headquarters, reviewing the annual report with pride. The foundation had expanded to 15 locations across 7 states. They'd helped over 2,000 women escape abusive situations. 83% of those women had successfully rebuilt their lives, finding jobs, securing housing, regaining custody of children, finishing education. The statistics were impressive, but Sarah cared most about the individual stories. Women like Rachel, who'd approached her at the opening ceremony and was now working as a paralegal, raising her daughter in a safe apartment. Women like Jennifer, who'd arrived with 3 kids and nothing else and was now running her own catering business. Women like Maria, who'd been so broken she couldn't look anyone in the eye and was now a counselor at the foundation, helping other survivors. "Ms. Mitchell?" Sarah's assistant knocked on the door. "Your 3 o'clock is here. The documentary crew?" Sarah smiled. "Send 'em in?" The documentary about the foundation and Sarah's story would air on Netflix next month. The filmmaker had spent 6 months interviewing Sarah,
women helped by the foundation, and experts on domestic violence. They'd even gotten interviews with Mrs. Chen and other neighbors who'd witnessed what Derek had done. They had not interviewed Derek. He refused to participate, still claiming he was the victim in all of this. After the interview wrapped, Sarah headed home early to surprise Emily. At 5 years old, Emily was bright, energetic, and completely fearless, everything Sarah had never been allowed to be. "Mommy!" Emily ran to greet her, wearing a princess dress and rain boots because she insisted they matched. "Grandpa Robert is teaching me chess. I almost won." Grandpa laughed from the living room. "She almost won because I let her almost win. But give her another year and she'll be beating me legitimately." Sarah's life had become something she'd never imagined possible. She lived in a beautiful house she'd bought herself, not as grand as the Caldwell estate, but perfect for her and Emily. She had meaningful work that made a difference. She had a family who loved her unconditionally. And she had peace. Real, genuine peace. Derek was in prison and would be for decades to come. Every year, on the anniversary of his sentencing, Sarah received a notification that he'd been denied parole again. She didn't celebrate these notifications, but she acknowledged them as confirmation that she and countless other women were safe. Amanda had been released after serving 6 years. She'd written to Sarah several times over the years, and eventually Sarah had written back. Not to forgive. Forgiveness wasn't something Sarah felt obligated to give, but to acknowledge Amanda's growth and wish her well. Amanda was now working at a women's shelter in Oregon, using her own experience to help others recognize manipulation and abuse. That evening, after putting Emily to bed, Sarah sat on her porch with tea, watching the sunset. Her phone rang. Grandma Rose, who was 90 years old now, but still sharp as ever. "I saw the preview for your documentary. Sarah, honey, your mother would be so proud. What you've built from such pain and darkness, it's extraordinary." "I wish she could have had the same chance," Sarah said softly. "I do too. Every day I wish I could have saved her. But Sarah, by helping all these women, you're honoring her memory in the most beautiful way possible. You're making sure other daughters don't lose their mothers to abuse and addiction. That's Catherine's legacy living on through you." After they hung up, Sarah thought about her mother, the woman in the photos who looked so much like Sarah, who died believing she was alone. Catherine had made choices that led to tragedy, but she'd also made one final choice that led to hope, leaving Sarah at that fire station where she'd be found and given a chance to life. Sarah pulled out her journal, something her therapist had suggested years ago. She wrote, "Dear Mom, I never got to know you, but I feel like I know you through everyone who loved you, through Dad's stories about your creativity and intelligence, through Grandma Rose's memories of your laughter and passion for music, through the photo of you holding me, looking at me with such love, even though you knew you couldn't keep me. I used to be angry that you left me, but now I understand. You left me because you loved me, because you wanted me to have better than what you could give. That took courage. I'm a mother now too. Emily is 5, and she's everything. Smart, funny, brave, everything I want her to be. And I understand now what you must have felt, holding me and knowing you had to let me go so I could be safe. I'm helping other women, Mom, women who are lost like you were, trapped like I was. The foundation has your name, and every woman we help is a tribute to you. Every life we save is honoring your memory. I wish you could have been saved. I wish you were here to meet Emily, to see what I've built, to know that your daughter turned out okay. But I carry you with me every day, in my face that looks like yours, in my determination to help others, in my refusal to let darkness win. You called me Sarah when you held me that one time. It means princess in Hebrew. I don't know if you knew that, but thank you for that name.
Thank you for choosing life for me, even when life was hard for you. Thank you for being brave enough to let me go. I hope wherever you are, you know that your daughter is safe, loved, and using her pain to help others. I hope you're proud. I love you, Mom. Always. Sarah. Sarah closed the journal, wiped her tears, and went inside. Tomorrow, she had 3 women arriving at the foundation who needed help leaving abusive situations. Tomorrow, she had a meeting with donors about expanding to 2 more states. Tomorrow, Emily had a school play where she was playing a tree. But tonight, Sarah was simply grateful. Grateful for rain that had brought her father. Grateful for the family she'd been too scared to accept until she had no choice. Grateful for Emily. Grateful for the foundation. Grateful for second chances. Derek had tried to convince her she was nothing, but nothing couldn't have built this life. Nothing couldn't have helped thousands of women. Nothing couldn't have raised a fearless, confident daughter. Nothing couldn't have turned pain into purpose. Sarah Mitchell Caldwell was everything, and she always would be.